we're going to kick off AI and curation and discoverability. Last night I wrote a quick post and put it on LinkedIn. I called it 57 channels and everything's missing. Bruce Springsteen wrote a great song years ago, 57 channels and well done, you passed the test. That line was written in 1992, so we're all aging out really quickly. Somehow in 2025, it's somewhat still true. Even when there are 57,000 channels on and millions of titles, we can't find anything. That's the paradox of abundance. We've built infinite shelves of content. We've got incredible streaming opportunities. And somehow, I can't find anything to watch when I turn my TV on. We've built so much stuff for people to watch, and we're relying on the algorithm to go find the content for us and bring it to us. And somehow, it's just not there. For decades, curation meant we had editors and playlist managers, that sort of thing, building something for us. We built the guide, we could surf it, we could find something. You could come home on Wednesday night, turn on the TV, flip, oh, watch that. That was fantastic. We don't really do that anymore. We come home now and rely on the TV to tell us what to watch. And is it working, is it not? Not so much. Nowadays, every interaction feeds back into a loop that continuously recurates the experience for us. Personalization has become infrastructure. It shapes the artwork, the headline, the order of rows, even the emotional tone of some of the artwork we see. And when it's done well, it's fantastic. But when it's done poorly, I think we get an experience where we feel a little bit less engaged. It's not without a lot of tension. Machine learning works really well when the metadata is there and it really feeds back into the world and makes it work for us. When that data carries all of our takes care of our operational bottlenecks and bias, it sometimes still brings biases and creates blind spots for us. The economics of personalization also matters. The algorithm optimizes for engagement, but what happens to that discovery, that moment of lean back when I just happen to run into a great penguin documentary, I think was the thing we talked about on Monday. If it optimizes for revenue, what happens to trust? So today we want to unpack that balance a bit. What happens balancing between automation, editorial judgment, personalization, and serendipity? I've got a great panel of people today. I'm not going to introduce them because they know who they are. I'll let them tell you who they are. So, Rebecca, who are you?
Who am I? Hi, I'm Rebecca Avery. I am the founder and principal of Integration Therapy. It is a consulting company. I help streaming networks fix revenue leaks within their operations. So think about anything that costs money that we've traced to the column that's coming from inside the house, and help prioritize what needs to be fixed in the instance of an acquisition, hyper-growth stage, or a major pivot.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Kritzer, and I'm the VP of Product for Discovery and AI at Tubi. Our teams really are focused on helping people discover and engage with content they love and do it in a very personalized manner. So I'll dig into that a little later.
Hi, I'm Tony Huidor. I'm the President of Technology and Chief Product Officer for Cineverse. We've been in the streaming space for 10 years, and we have a platform called Matchpoint that does content ingest, content delivery. Then we have a whole app framework, and then we have analytics, unified analytics, and our newest product is called Cinesearch, which is AI-powered advanced search and discovery. I've spent the last 5 years trying to solve this problem, and we feel we have the solution that really gets us to where we need to be.
And I'm Scott Davis. I'm the CTO of Media and Entertainment for GlobalLogic. I'm a fill-in. If you look in the program, you'll notice somebody else is supposed to be doing this. I think I got a call Thursday from Andy Beach going, we've got an illness, can you do this? So I'm cheating, I'm using notes, and I've got the questions all in front of me, so forgive me today. I usually prep a little bit more for this. We're doing this a little bit ad hoc today. I'm going to go through a bunch of questions I've got for the folks. They've already had the questions, so it's not quite as unprepared as we'd like. We're going to talk first about grounding in infrastructure, and it's a question for Rebecca. Let me start with you. Metadata just won an Emmy. The folks over at Cable Labs got an Emmy for all the work they've done there. Metadata is a way of saying the invisible layer of infrastructure is now recognized as a creative enabler and a revenue driver. Why does metadata matter so much to discovery in this AI era? And how is it evolving to keep pace with generative models? Where's metadata evolving in today's workflows?
Metadata is my first love. It's kind of how I got into this world. So metadata operations is something that's very central to what I do. And I've been excited to see it evolve even a little bit before AI with some of the more forward-thinking networks, where it used to be with broadcast television, there was also metadata. I think my thing just came off. Okay, I'm here. I'm back. There were also metadata deliveries. It was data that you put in a binder that you deliver to the network, and then they put it in a closet and forget about it. And then I think my first streaming project was in 2011, was when I learned how metadata moves and how to migrate. And just really understanding the schemas, and then there were these things called tags and genres and categories, and then tags started getting used for everything. When you asked for a new schema for something, they would just use the tags. We're evolving out of that, and we are actually at a place now where it's not about tagging something correctly, it's about providing context. And it's a place where you can employ corporate strategy in ways that we've never been able to do before. You can say, well, who is my audience? It comes back to market research. How do they think? Why are they choosing what they're choosing? And how do we express that in a way that is agile as our audience is and actually has a lasting effect? And AI is helping us to be able to actually pivot that strategy, because you don't just have somebody filling out metadata manually all the time.
Cool. Tony, I want to expand the lens a little bit and pass over to you. Discovery's always been powered by algorithms, but AI brings a little different set of tools to the world. What's actually different about AI-powered curation compared to legacy recommendation engines, especially in this fast and OTT world that we're living in, where scale advertising and content diversity collides?
Yeah, similar to what Rebecca said, I'm very well versed in metadata and spent the last 5 years trying to understand why search and discovery is broken. And really what the realization I had probably 2 years ago was we can't discover content because we're relying on the wrong metadata. And the example I give is, if you're saying, if you want to allow people to discover content in a natural way, you need to enable natural language search. And in order to do that, you need to understand, well, how do people search for content? You have to move away from having them rely on keywords. And so what we've been pushing is let them find content the way they would if they asked their friend, hey, what movie do you recommend? And so generally, if you say, I want the top horror movies of the 1980s, or what are Al Pacino's best dramas, each of those questions requires a different set of metadata. And so to get the top anything, you need box office data. If you need the best, you need a normalized set of reviews. If you want the most popular, or if you want the happiest or scariest, you need different types of metadata that allow someone to discover that. So we spent the last 18 months developing the data set for our search product called Cinesearch, and we call our search data set Cinecore. And so Cinecore, at a very rich level, is storing very deep semantic, thematic, emotional data that is generated by AI in order to allow what AI is very good at is taking massive sets of data and pouring through it and giving you matches. And the example I give is, if you say, I like Reservoir Dogs, and what else do you recommend? Most search engines, if they can answer that, are going to show you Quentin Tarantino movies because it's keying it based on director. With Cinesearch, you ask that question, and it shows you Snatch, Usual Suspects, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, because the AI understands through the data that these films are related intrinsically in a way that's not dependent on the metadata. And that's what we've spent with Cinesearch over the last 5 years trying to figure out, and we're in the process of trying to bring this to market now.
Sharon, do you want to jump in on anything on that, or?
No, I mean, I think I definitely agree with everything you're saying. If you look at the behaviors of users and where they are doing, like our traditional keyword search, and how we've used to use the Googles of the world, and today now really transitioning into that conversational search is really key in how we think about discovery. So at Tubi in particular, we think about that as really those inputs for us to really center around what does the viewer want and how we think about that. For us, the challenge is we have the largest library of movies and TV titles out of any streamer. And so how does someone even discover what is there and what is that for them? And so there are definitely elements of tying that into thinking through how do we improve that search experience to really personalize that for you based on the context that you're providing us and the metadata that we ultimately have and rely on, both internal as we look through the content itself and ingest it, as well as those external signals, and then tying that to the viewer experience and what signals did you give us to really personalize and position that and that value to you.
Cool. You sit closest to the user of all of us here. AI systems only matter when they land really, really well with the consumer. If it doesn't, the personalization doesn't really feel authentic. You don't really build that trust you really need. You guys have, 300,000 movies and TV episodes. Is engagement and the monetization upside bigger from global algorithm improvements or from tune delivery by surfacing the right content in the right microgenres where audiences demand clusters? Well, which one works better for you?
Yeah, so we definitely start with the viewer. That is the most important thing, and that viewer engagement. And so when you come to Tubi, we obviously first time know absolutely nothing about you. And there is also a human element there in terms of like, how do we curate that right information, but also trying to begin to get those signals towards that engagement. The more engaged you are, the more you retain, and the more we can grow that flywheel ultimately. And so when we look at optimization for that, it really is around optimizing for that engagement drivers that will retain. There are elements, like you're saying, with those micro genres where yes, 100%, if we learn that you are a big spaghetti western fan, we have a huge, massive library of spaghetti western content. We will help you continue to discover that content and be able to engage in it. But at the same time, there's a balance there of what else is available. So it's not just about these micro genres, but what else can Tubi be for you as a surface that has that? We have fast as well, fast channels. And so how do we ensure that you can discover that relative content as well?
Just a side note, I was getting ready for this panel the other day, and my wife and I were talking about it, and she goes, "What's Tubi?" And I put Tubi on the Android TV. My wife is now a complete Tubi addict, so thank you so much. I think before I go on to the next editing, I'm loving this conversation because in the past, this is something you and I were talking about yesterday, data and media seem to have this huge gap, this chasm between the two of them. Never the twain should meet, right? Nowadays, we hear a little bit from people how, when we do stuff with media and entertainment, we build these workflows, there's this exhaustive data out there. We'll consume that as exhaust. That's not the way it is anymore. Data's fuel. Data drives how we make these systems work. So we gotta stop thinking with data, something we'll deal with later. Data's gotta drive all this stuff, and that's a constant thing I'm hearing from all three of you. Thanks for that. I wanna jump into some operational realities. Rebecca, I'm gonna come back to you. When you deploy AI curation at scale, what are the hidden costs people underestimate? Data quality, compute, rights clearance, or the human oversight still required? What are we missing?
There's really a couple of places. The first being strategic alignment. So it's the whole reason my company is called Integration Therapy, is because there are a lot of things you have to keep in mind when you want to change one thing. And I think AI is something that can be rocket fuel to just about any company and really kind of help level the playing field. Also, it can be a rocket fueled race to the bottom, depending on the quality of your data and depending on your strategic alignment. Strategic alignment is the #1 revenue leak for just about every business out there. And when you don't have your strategy tightened, you have just put rocket fuel in Tony's systems to create a huge mess that now we have to stop the whole roadmap and figure out how to go and fix. And so that is a huge cost risk.
Okay, Tony, how do you balance platform business goals with user trust? Should recommendation engines explain themselves, or should they just feel right?
From our perspective, I think, once again, going back to our Cineverse product, to to solve search and discovery, you have to have a very deep intrinsic understanding of film and what makes up the film. But you also need to understand the user. And as Dana was saying, they're spending a lot of time understanding what the user's likes are. We've gone several steps further in that we have a feature called Cineverse Connect, where you could link all the streaming services to your account. And when we link these services, we bring in their viewing history. It's personal data that they own, so they're granting us permission to take their data associated to their account. And then we can define the user not based on what they've been watching for the last six weeks, 6 months, but for all of their, since they subscribed to Netflix from day one. And all that, it's called behavioral data. So now we have viewing history, likes, dislikes, what they're watching, what they have on their watch list. So suddenly, from a machine learning perspective, we have a very deep understanding of the user. And so, earlier in my career, I spent time at Disney, and kind of the mantra was always, whatever you do, it should feel like magic, right? Users shouldn't ask, what is it, how does it work? It should just feel like, oh, it works. And so our approach has been, we want users to communicate with the chatbot, look for content, and it just works. And having it be transparent, where the technology doesn't have to be explained, they just know that if they're asking for anything they want, it just works. And so in order to do that, you have to have a deep understanding of the user, their user taste, and their user behavior, but also you have to have a very deep intrinsic understanding of film. And that's been how we've approached advanced search.
Okay. Cool, I appreciate that. Sharon, personally, I can speak English, really I can. I've heard us say metadata 3 or 4 different ways up here, so I don't feel too bad. Personalization engines are in effect, they're the new editors, right? How do you keep them from narrowing horizons, reinforcing bias, or over optimizing away surprise? I mean, as I said earlier on, I love the idea of just sitting down and going, flip on the guide and going, there's that penguin documentary I didn't expect. How do we get back to that kind of finding something by accident?
Yeah, so I think it ties to my earlier comment around really that balance of how do we understand the viewer, to your point, Tony, around really getting those signals, implicit and explicit, around how are you engaging with our platform overall. And then from there, for us, it's also how do we add those elements of delight. So for example, we recently launched creators on Tubi. So we're bringing longer form creator content onto the platform. And so maybe you've watched horror movies and you're really into haunted houses, for example. And so now, all of a sudden, you're kind of flipping through, and there's a creator called Watcher on Tubi now that literally they do kind of like tours of haunted houses. And it's this delightful kind of surprise to you that it's like, wait, this isn't a movie, this isn't a TV show, but it's something similar. And it's extending that kind of purview for you as a viewer and what you're doing. And ultimately, it is about bringing that delight. And there's, outside of just those subgenres to our earlier conversations, there are those other elements tied to what you were talking about, Tony, which is like, well, what else is that doesn't directly tie in? And it really is about understanding both the metadata of the content and the viewer and their preferences and behaviors to tie that web together to ensure that we are presenting that content most effectively.
Cool. By the way, earlier on when you said spaghetti westerns, you're talking to my soul. I binged out.
I did not know that ahead of time. Perfect.
Tony, earlier on this week, we had a panel that referred back to lean back as serendipitous viewing. Serendipity is part of what makes entertainment magical, and we do like the magic. How do you preserve genuine discovery in a system built to predict?
Yeah, I think you use a word that I hate, which is algorithm. Algorithms are something that's good when you're trying to reach a massive audience, but the algorithm is generally going to give everyone the same recommendation. One of the concepts that we're working on is the ability where if you go to your main screen and you have rails or carousels, you can edit the carousel and then you essentially say, I like spaghetti westerns, and you save that, and every time you come on, that rail is spaghetti westerns, right? And it's generative, so it's not curated where these are the 10 spaghetti westerns. It's going to give you a random selection of spaghetti westerns, and the next shelf you might say, I like film noir movies from the 1930s that have a dramatic plot. And you save that, and then when you come on, So suddenly it's recommended through a search, AI-based search, but it's generative in a way where it feels random and you do get that serendipity. And because it's advanced search, one of the things that really is dear to us, we're a small independent company, and we're never gonna have the Hollywood movies. So how do we surface, it's like, you know, digging for vinyl if you're a DJ. How do you find ways for people to discover these uncut gems that they don't know about? And the only way you can do that is through Gen AI, where you understand the film at a very deep level, and you can bring up and surface these movies that you may not have heard of, but are very similar to what you're looking for. And so that's a lot of what our approach to how to handle all this is, really make it so there is that serendipity and that randomness, and it doesn't always feel like it's prescribed and here's what we say you should watch and these are your only options.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, man. I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about future horizons, if we could. Rebecca, what defaults around AI-powered discovery don't exist yet, in your opinion, but absolutely need to get brought into our conversation?
I really like this question because it's not something that I get to just say at a client meeting, because I have to think about the fact that they have partnerships to consider. But I really wish that in discoverability and curation, you could give your audience the ability to opt out of content. I think that there are some guardrails that are kind of being put in for, okay, this person has been served this thing, 8 times and they're not clicking on it, maybe serve them something else. But the idea to give your audience the power to say, I don't like spaghetti westerns, man, and just opt out of it completely.
Let's ask the audience. How many of you guys would like to be able to opt out? All right, so I think you got a winner.
Oh, that's why I wanted to talk about it. But I know very instinctively that as soon as I say that to the COO of a streamer, they're gonna, oh great, our partners are really gonna love that the audience is just taking them off of the whole UI. Because it's not very
transparency for the viewer. Be able to see, what do you think I like? No, I don't like that, and let me adjust it.
Okay, that's good.
That makes that, okay.
So I saw a hand.
that was awesome.
Suddenly we're done.
Let's get into it. It's a round table.
Is the caller still there? Again, I'm dating myself for age. Tony or Sharon, if you could have one research problem to the wider community, these people over here, something not solved today, what do you want these people to go solve for you that they haven't solved yet?
From my end, I sit on several industry panels, and I was on a call with a few TV manufacturers, and they were complaining about fragmentation and lack of personalization. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're the best position to solve this problem, but yet you have the worst personalization. Why don't we start with, how do you get users to create an account that is used across every service on your TV? Let's start there, right? And if we can get the industry behind, to solve search and discovery, every TV should have as I say, would you buy an Apple iPhone and not have the ability to personalize it to yourself? Every iPhone had the same menu, same apps? Of course not. But yet TV manufacturers don't treat their TVs like if it's a personalized device. They expect everyone one size fits all, and TVs have to move very deeply into personalization in order to solve search and discovery. And I think that's something as a whole, the whole industry should be really pushing for.
I'm gonna bring in a little bit of a different topic of what I would want the community to solve for. I think there are patterns that we've seen over, the last decades where attention spans are getting shorter. And so we've seen a big shift in content consumption as a result of that. So imagine now we have a platform full of these wonderful movies and people only go through X percentage of that movie. That's a problem in itself for everyone in the industry. At the same time, there's a new trend that we're seeing where the Gen Zers are actually starting to consume longer form content again, which is really interesting, especially serialized content. So we're seeing that behavior. And for us at Tubi, 50% of our audience are millennials and Gen Z. So it's a real problem for us to solve. So the question that I would present to the community is, what is that right format that is balancing short form and long form? it's, I think, a really interesting thing that no one solved. We've gone to the extreme of, social media, that's not us, to, then the traditional, like, really long form. And what is that right balance? And I think that's a really interesting problem for us as a community to figure out.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I'm actually just going to take your point one step further, and I know it's something that a lot of media companies have been playing with, which is how do you successfully integrate streaming and social media, and RIP to a lot of different companies that have tried to become that in-between piece, but I think it's definitely a problem we're solving.
Just to add, I would say microdramas.
Yes.
So that's an area that we recently announced an initiative to use our platform to come to market with a microdrama streaming platform where we're going to aggregate all these microdramas and aim to be the Amazon Prime of microdramas. I think the quality, there's so many issues from the quality and editorial and professional production values of these new forms of entertainment. We're trying to elevate that, and we're going to really take a different approach. We will aggregate that, but we think there's something here. Based on the viewership we were seeing, we think there's a way to take that and integrate it with longer form content where this isn't seen as a separate thing, separate experience, separate app. What if we took this and merged it with long form content, and we also elevate the quality and production values of these microdramas that are largely produced currently in China.
Yeah. If you were here on Monday, for the last couple of years, we've been around, we talk, and you would hear me pitch about the lack of great creative content in advertising. I think sometimes when we have some of this content that's coming up to us, it's been created for us. It gets interstitials or pre or post rolls of terrible advertising, which interferes with all the hard work that you guys have done to create this great experience. I think the advertising community needs to catch up with some of the great creatives coming up, the microdramas, in the short form content, and even now the return to some long form content. I'm watching some incredibly great independent stuff come out, all these different platforms, and it's so great to see so much of that stuff come out, but it's devastating to see such bad creative on the outside. That's my pitch for better creative. We've got plenty of time for questions. I've got a lot of questions. We already had one throw in from the audience. Go for it, David.
So, AI likes to be labeled as this great, new, amazing thing to solve all of our problems, right? In my experience, AI has actually been one of the most prevalent uses for, personalization discovery, specifically trying to solve this for a long time, right? This isn't new. Having, IBM Blue doing personalization for big streaming platforms, was years ago. It still sucks, right? What's really going to change? And are we actually going to be able to do something that's novel and different? Because it's still a major issue, and I think one of the biggest challenges is around, as Tony, you touched on this a little bit, even if you solve it on Tubi, right? Not everyone only uses Tubi. They usually have multiple platforms, devices, so forth. How are we going to solve this to truly not only make it better, but to make it so it's more consistent across its experiences that people use? And even your users for Tubi, for instance, I mean, they all access only from their phone or their Fire TV, Apple TV. Like, these things are all very different interfaces that pose this challenge. Is AI really going to help with this, or are we looking for a solution to a problem in the wrong area?
I'll take that. As the arms dealer up here, I think to your point, we've come to that same realization that our technology can be far superior to anything out there. But we're a small company trying to change a rising tide, and so I think the idea that we've been tossing is the idea of having a consortium, an advanced search and discovery consortium. I think as an industry, we need to get together and all say, we all know this is a problem, we need to fix it, and here's what we need to do to make it right. And I think the first step is, in an industry, we have to abandon using traditional metadata. Everyone thinks Gracenote or Real Good or Just Watch or Fabric, any of these metadata providers, everyone's trying to build advanced search using traditional metadata. And I can say from experience, it won't work. Even if you have LLMs tied to this metadata, it doesn't solve that problem that if you want a sad movie, you're not going to get that emotional understanding from traditional metadata. And so that's probably the first step as an industry, getting everyone behind. We need to invest in better, more contextual, deeper metadata to get better at search.
That's where, though, AI comes in, right? It is able for us to ingest and understand that content in a degree that we just couldn't, given how metadata was historically to how it is today. So, you know, for example, like very basic, but today we can use now AI to generate subtitles and translate those subtitles into multiple languages. That's something that was very expensive to do, and a lot of these technologies are becoming very mainstream and centralized that will help accelerate that. So now, maybe, you know, if I'm a Spanish speaker and I'm looking for these titles that are either translated or eventually dubbed, right? Like now you can really fast forward here, and you don't even have to fast forward, it already exists today. We can lean into those technologies, I think, as like a community because they are very accessible now.
Yeah, I think like what you were talking about, David, is like when you're searching for something on your Apple TV versus your Roku versus something else, and so there's all of these different streamers that are saying this is how we want our search data to work, and then it all gets funneled into these larger platforms that are all treating it a little bit different, and so you end up with this inconsistent experience. But I think if you're using AI to really dig down and just be more intelligent about the data, and if you are sort of seeing to the other side of that coin, which is being more intelligent about how you leverage the data that you have about your audience, that will become more of a moot point than it is right now.
I saw those other questions. I want to follow this one up with something I had. If there's one common myth about AI recommendation engines that you wish you could retire, what would it be? Or is there one? Like, you don't have to have one. If you don't have one, it's okay.
I have one.
Okay, and I figured there would be one here.
I have a lot of opinions about data, but there are still assumptions that it's neutral. So we have conversations about how data and AI isn't neutral, but I feel like we're still having those conversations in a different room where we talk about just use AI to do this or use AI to do that. Strategy is still central, and strategy is never going to be the same, whether you're Tubi or you're Cineverse or you're Pluto or you're somebody else. You are pulling your own analytics and you're making your own decisions, and then you're developing or using a third-party tool that was also developed from somebody's point of view. So that neutrality just doesn't exist.
You get pass is okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Babish, you're first, and I'll jump back.
One comment I wanted to make about AI usage and potentially for you, because you can look at it. AI can look and do translation. Why can't you guys also use it to, now that it's getting smart enough to actually map out the emotional curve of a movie or any asset, so that when, from a user perspective, I don't know what these tags and labels are because I'm not part of the industry. All I know is I want to see a sad movie, I want to see a happy show. And the other thing that people really don't talk about when they're looking at curation, they're asking somebody, how much time do you have? Hey, I've got half an hour. I'm in for the evening. I've got 3 hours worth of time to do. Or, hey, I'm at my lunch break. Give me something in half an hour. And I want something like, where can AI curation come through to help out, not just with the type of thing that I want to watch, but in the time frame that I want to watch it?
We already do both of those things.
But there's an issue of, like, if I say I liked Dog Day Afternoon, is it because of the characters, because of the mood, because of the director? Like, just because I said I like something, how do you know what element of that is that I like or dislike?
I'm sorry, if you said Dog Day Afternoon, the Al Pacino?
Yeah.
So what it'll look at is if it says you like it, it's going to look at it thematically, and it's going to look at style of editing, the themes, the plot. One of the things that I'm very partial about is trying to stop recommending movies because of talent. Because ultimately an actor may have an input on the film, but it's really the director and really the plot and everything else. And so going back to the Reservoir Dogs example, when we give a recommendation, we're not giving it because it's Tarantino. We're looking at its non-narrative linear editing. It's a bank robbery gone bad. It's a story of the underworld. And so we look for other movies that share those traits, and we would recommend it based on that. So in your case with Dog Day Afternoon, it's going to be about a guy robbing a bank to pay for a sexual reassignment operation for his girlfriend. So we would give you probably other movies that have similar trans LGBTQ issues or plot points, and that's where the recommendation would be. It wouldn't be Son of a Woman or other Al Pacino movies.
I think the one thing I would just add to that is something that we really care about is that trust with our viewers. And how do you build that trust to have them understand why? There's one thing to personalize the experience, but there's the behind of it, like, well, why are you showing me this? And so we have internally called signals of trust, which is really around how are we leveraging different metadata points, behavioral points from you to inform you the actual crux of it, and being very transparent about that in helping you understand. So like, for example, I love Rotten Tomato. And so for me, that is a data point to show what the Rotten Tomato score helps me make a pretty good decision on whether or not I trust the movie. Is it good enough? And so those are things that we're leaning into in addition to that. And then of course there's that contextual awareness that you're talking about, which is like, every night after my kids go down to bed, I'm back online in front of the TV but working. What kind of shows really line up to that? And I have that behavior and pattern.
I've got a queue of questions. So the young guy in the black shirt.
All right. All right. Under ironic. So my question is, this is all about AI-powered curation, discoverability, but what about the vaunted A word, advertising? So at Tubi, is there a correlation where you were crossing the streams between the discovery business, the search business, and the advertising business? And how do you think data and data flow impacts all that?
So for us, the number one thing is user engagement, like our viewer engagement. And so we really lean into that ultimately, and it's part of that flywheel. If someone is engaged, then retains, then we can serve them, right? It ties to the trust too, where ultimately, if you've engaged and found value in our platform and the content that we have for you, you're more likely to then stick around, and we can be really smart, and we are very smart, I'd like to say, about where we insert then the ads, right? Because we're an AVOD business, so we really rely on that. And so it is a critical part to that, and that, that's part of that flywheel. So then, again, if you have a positive experience, then a positive ads experience, you will come back and engage. So that's how we think about it.
Just to add to that, I think for us, because we know everything about the film and we know the emotions of the film, we can then pass that emotional data through the bid stream, eventually make its way to the ad buyer. So the ad buyer, it's kind of the example of, there was that Jack in the Box commercial of someone dancing, and it was, I think the war had broken out in Israel or something. That clearly shouldn't happen because you're trying to sell a happy product and advertising in a very emotionally tense program. So what we do is we're taking all this data with the goal of eventually making it available to the advertiser.
Okay. I'm going to try and get 2 more questions in. So short questions, short answers, please. Right there.
Is there still a place for the human curator in all of this? Because as simple as they are, I still appreciate Vimeo picks, right? Staff picks or criterions, what library recommendations.
I mean, from our perspective, we see it as advanced search. If you want to dig in and go down the rabbit hole, it doesn't necessarily take over what's programmed on the menu on the main screen. I think what the question earlier or the comment earlier was the trust issue. I think what most consumers don't realize is sometimes those spots are paid for, and that's where I think it's bad for the user. It's good for the platform, but for the user, if you're seeing something featured on the homepage, you think it's good. It may not be. Maybe someone just has a bigger marketing budget, and so for us, the curation and programming on the main screen, we really leave up to the partner.
Yes, 100%. There's still room for editorial and curation. We have that team. I work extremely closely with that team. And there are elements where, yes, there are, current events, like moods, things like that are really critical to ensure that we are bringing that human element into it. And so when you go through discovery at Tubi, there is a mix of that. And there are people who go into our top editorial picks, as a catalog and go deep on that. And that is how they find that content that they love.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay. Nope. Sorry, I thought there was a hand at the back. Nope, there's not. All right, right there.
Alan from Warner Brothers. The question that I have is around, like, if you're gonna have metadata, then you're gonna have time metadata, which means that you can generate shorts, you can generate clips at scale. So I'm kind of wondering how you guys are thinking about, clipping your content and using social media to then drive discovery. We've certainly noticed a big uplift in that path.
Once again, because we have a deep understanding of film on a scene by scene, frame by frame, scene by scene basis, we do that now where if you want to create a TikTok or Instagram post and you have a certain movie you're trying to promote, and we could say, give me a 30-second clip of love scenes or kisses or romantic scenes. And then the AI will scan all the metadata and say, here's all the scenes, and then it'll clip them, and then you say 30 seconds, add music, and then it'll go and automate that. So that's a fairly standard use case that's becoming pretty widely available within the industry. But the only way you can do that is because that deep understanding of a film at a scene level.
General +1 to that. At Tubi, one way we've implemented it is, we actually have previews within the kind of the feed. So you go into your homepage, and then that video tile actually transition into a trailer. Those trailers are both not generated, but ML clipped, to be precise. And then they can then also be personalized. So, if you're someone who really likes the emotional romantic scene, or if you really like that car racing scene, what is that thing that's going to help you understand what is the crux of it, watching that segment?
Yeah, Monkey actually, I believe, has that available already in their marketplace. They're doing a fully automated and distributed. You don't have to touch anything for your fast channel. So it's becoming something that isn't just for the well-funded big players, but the smaller fast channel owners can do it too.
So I had the chance to be at IBC, and I saw several different vendors on several different clouds where they had content understanding, that were able to do semantic search. They're down to a place where they can tell you, that's a panning shot. I can tell you, they could find logos and stuff, and it wasn't built on humongous histories of content. They were doing fast search on deep libraries, almost instantaneous. The amount of stuff that we can get from these libraries is amazingly fast, and AI is driving all of it. I get to ask the last question, 1 minute each at most. Okay. If there was one lesson about AI discovery you've learned recently that your past self 5 years ago should have known, what was it? Rebecca, we're starting with you.
I wish that I had understood 5 years ago what the resistance was going to be to not have AI quite so central in the conversation. It's something that builds a lot of context for where we are. And I worry that this industry, which has been under a lot of pressure to adapt in huge ways, particularly traditional media companies that just woke up one day and said, oh, we're a tech company now. And so they started focusing so much on tech, and it's been so much about, well, what can this do? What can't it do? What's it going to be able to do?
Do you want to name names?
I do not want to name names. I believe this is going to be on YouTube.
Yeah, this will be on YouTube. Do not name names.
But there are some limited places where they actually have said, here are the problems that we need to solve. And engineering companies have stepped up in a really big way to solve them, like localization, which you were just talking about. And I wish I'd understood what that resistance was, so that I could strive to be a voice at the table to say, hang on a second, these shorter technology life cycles means that you can go imagine the world that you want, because if it isn't possible today, it will be soon.
5 years ago, AI wasn't what we thought AI would be exactly today, and how fast. I think that's the biggest thing, is just looking at the last 18 months, especially the acceleration of what we have. I mean, look at Sora 2 and like, holy shit. Sorry, but really. So I think
sensor just jumped on. So
So I think for me, the thing that I wish we knew is how to prepare ourselves effectively to where we are today, because no one knew it was going to move this quickly. And if we had that insight, and hindsight is the best thing we could have, but that would have presented us in a very different position in terms of how to leverage the technology. That's what I wish.
I got to be at ground zero at Microsoft when somebody walked in the room and said, hey, you're in media and entertainment. Do you think AI might have something important to bring to that? What a ridiculous question, and we had no idea what had happened in that time, so it's crazy. Tony, you get
I'll echo the same thing. It's only going to get better, fast. And a few years ago, as we were building our product, my engineers would get caught up on like, oh, this cost, it's cost prohibitive, we can't do this. And I would say, don't worry about it, because in 6 months it's going to get cheaper. And we've seen that. And not only has it gotten cheaper, it's gotten significantly better. And it's one of those situations, if you don't get on the boat now, you're going to miss it.
Absolutely. Hey, this panel's been fantastic. They dealt with me getting swapped in the last minute, dealing with me trying to get them questions and answering back. So can we get a big hand for this panel?